I got out. After then, 3 months later, the Supreme Court ruled in my favor and overthrew the marijuana laws in the state of Michigan. And in the meantime, I did all kinds of other cultural things, like I started managing the MC5. I built them into kind of a popular attraction. They had a lot of thousands of kids following them. They got a record contract with Elektra the day we recorded our album. Then we created the White Panther Party. We wanted to be more than just a rock and roll band. We wanted to say something. So we said, we're White Panthers, we support the Black Panther Party. We want to overthrow the government. Rock and roll is a weapon of cultural revolution, you know.
For some reason, the people around John didn't trust Tom Forcade. And this was one of the problems, that Tom was such a mysterious character, and there was such paranoia at the time that a lot of people just saw Tom coming out of nowhere and trying to take over the movement.
It was this eminent grief from the lunch bucket of America, I mean the armpit of America, somewhere way out there among the mesas and the tumbleweeds and cactus. Here came this guy out of a Sergio Leone spaghetti western with a slouch hat. And
we had a party for Punk magazine, and things didn't go well because Sid Vicious, the news that Sid Vicious had killed Nancy had just hit the media, and the media was trying to get in the party and get our reactions and focus on the negativity of Nancy Spunchen's death. And Tom saw me after the party when I felt inconsolable about how badly everything had gone that night, because it was near a riot, and the owners of the club had pulled a gun on us and taken the receipts. And he put his hand on my shoulder and told me everything was great and tried to lift my spirits.
But when Tom went to Hollywood, he did that too, and that's when he got this gun. And Tom had never been the least violent. I mean, I never saw him hurt anything or, I mean, he had this gun. I didn't quite understand why he had the gun, but I think he got a little paranoid I also never saw him do cocaine. I mean, he might do a line or two, but I know so many people who have been at parties who where there were bowls of cocaine. I have never personally in my life seen that. I mean, I was still sheltered even in the midst of this incredible maelstrom of like being in the center of the culture with the guy who started the whole, industry of like High Times chronicling it and all of that. I guess Tom probably protected me from that too. He didn't want me to become some sort of a coke head, which thank God I didn't. Because people around us were, there were so many casualties of drugs, whether they died or they just became useless from abusing drugs. And Tom was really against that. I don't know how many people really, certainly nobody believed me after he died. I don't know if people would now believe me, but we used to talk about it a lot, Tom and I. And I mean, he really did want to take the magazine in a different direction because he was feeling responsible for Jack, and he was feeling responsible if the magazine was going to get people, abusing drugs and ruining their lives. So, I don't know.
I remember telling Gabrielle to get rid of Tom's gun. Because I knew he had like a gun in the freezer or something like that. Right. Had money and gun in the freezer.
He was obviously in a terrible depression. He went through this though in winters. He would get in bed and he wouldn't get out of bed. I mean, and that day I was making lunch. I was making stuffed eggplant that Tom would never have eaten. He didn't like vegetables, but he liked tacos. But I remember Jim Drugas, who, remember Tom started this bookstore, New Morning in Soho. There was no bookstore, and we used to look out and say, God, we have to walk miles to get a newspaper, miles to get a magazine, miles to get a book. And I said, why don't you start a bookstore? And he did. It was great. New Morning Bookstore, after the Dylan album, I think it was. And So Jim Drugas came into our lives because he was the first, I guess, manager of the bookstore, and he was terrific. And he's still in the book business. Anyway, Jim was over that day. Tom was in the bedroom of our loft, and we were in the front room, Jim and I, talking about the bookstore, and I was making stuffed eggplant. And Jim was a vegetarian. He was always a vegetarian. And so we were going to eat the stuffed eggplant. I remember going in to Tom and saying, Jim's here. Do you want to come out and have lunch with us? And I'll make you some tacos. And, no, thanks. I said, well, can I get you anything? And he said, no, just the fact that you're here is great. And I said, well, I'm going to get you some cranberry juice. So I went into the front room, got some cranberry juice, brought it back to the bedroom, gave it to Tom, who said, thanks a lot. And I went back into the living room and shut the door so he could sleep. And the next thing Jim and I know, we heard a gun shot. And it was almost like, who would know it was a gunshot? We didn't even really, it was just a horrifying noise, a scary noise.
And there were many times when I called Tom at his home, and he would pick up the phone, and Stevie wouldn't say anything. So I thought, oh, fuck it, I'm just going to launch. I went, hi, Tom, it's Maureen. This is what we've got. We've got all the cans filmed, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then I hear the phone going, he had just shot himself. He had just shot himself.
And we ran into the bedroom, and there was Tom. There was Tom with this side of his head. He had shot himself. So that's what happened. And I swear, I don't know whether, Tom could have been doing Russian roulette. I don't think there was a bullet in other chambers. That's the kind of depressed that he was, and the kind of person that he was about irony, and, he could have thought, well, if I die, I die, and if I don't die, I'm not supposed to die. But this is definitely how bad I feel.
So I got back to the office, and everybody was saying, where are you? Where were you, Maureen? We were trying to find, of course, there was no cell phones. Where were you, Maureen? We were trying to find you. Tom's at St. Vincent's. And I said, what's Tom at St. Vincent's for? Well, he shot himself. That's what happened.
And then I had to go to the hospital, and he was brain dead. And, I was 26. I had to just say, well, he wouldn't want to live like this. There was no way he was going to be alive or live. And I just said, no, you can stop the machines. And, because we'd talked about that kind of stuff. And, it was, after that, it was a horror show, really, a horror show. Some people thought I murdered Tom. People who had no idea, jealous people, crazy people, paranoid people. There were people who came I moved to a different loft. I couldn't stay there. I got a different place. And people would come and spray paint murderer outside of my door, on my door. And at one point I needed bodyguards. It was and then there was a lawsuit. That's when I found out how much High Times was worth. So really, it was quite horrible. When Tom died, I still wish he were alive now. I do. I know he would so love Obama. He would so be happy with what's going on today.
I was about 10 blocks away in my loft with my girlfriend at the time, Deanne Stillman, who was close to Cindy, and I don't know, we were all pretty shook up about it. I went to the hospital, and I looked through the door, and I saw him there with the tube. Who else was there? I guess Wilcock was there. And I was really upset about it.
He was obviously in a pit of black depression, but she had been he had been in that kind of pit before and come out of it and been absolutely brilliant and ebullient and warm, loving kindness, and then gone back into it and come out of it. He'd done that often enough that obviously it was only a matter of time until something like that happened. Yeah.
But the last time I talked to him was 2 days before he died, and I called him up and said, I met someone who could help our business, and this is exactly the person we've been looking for. His name was Spacely, and he was like an old compadre of Tom's. He was a member of the SDP family, but he was into punk rock, and he was just the guy that Tom and I were looking for. He told me to call Maureen and make an appointment with his secretary. And I think it was a day or two later that I heard the news on the radio that he passed away.
And Tom was so wildly in love with life. So he had that wonderful ability that creative people have of being able to turn you on to life by example. He had everything to live for at that time, I felt. We made lots of plans. We had all sorts of things we were going to do. And he really had nothing to die for. And I still don't understand why he killed himself.